Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wing It F1 podcast. I'm Freddie, and this is Nigel, and we're going to talk to you about the big F1 news that has happened today, which is that Oscar Piastri is officially confirmed at McLaren for 2023 and 2024. There's been a whole load of speculation, a whole load of random toing and froing between Alpine and McLaren for the past month or so, ever since Fernando Alonso left them in the lurch and Alpine said, yeah, Oscar Piastri's our driver. And Oscar Piastri said live on this podcast for us when we were recording it, that he isn't actually going to Alpine. He's going to go somewhere else. And it turned out that was McLaren, and that's official. The Formula One Contract Recognition Board has ruled in favour of McLaren. So, Nigel, I hope you're doing good. We're not doing pleasantries because we're going straight into the news. What has happened with Oscar Piastri and the Contract Recognition Board today?
Well, basically, the key thing is that we found out Piastri is signed on the 4th of July, which was the day after the British Grand Prix. And the key thing from that is that Daniel Ricciardo put out a tweet 9 days later, I think it was, that he was going to drive for McLaren next year and that he had a contract, etc. So it does suggest, and from what Ricciardo said as well since the announcement, he had no idea that Piastri had signed on the 4th of July. And we've already found out 7 weeks later that it's been confirmed that Ricciardo will be leaving McLaren at the end of this season as well. So those are the key points. Andreas Seidel, the team principal, when talking to TV and media people, he was very tight-lipped, didn't want to go into any details about the contract. The person I want to hear from is Lauren Rossi, because we haven't heard anything at all from him for the last 2 months about it. It's only been on miles after now, and he claims to, have not known about the Alonso thing and then not known about the Piastri thing. So that's who I want to hear from. The 4th of July date is a surprise to me. I didn't expect it to be that early, but I absolutely understand it. I'd say it's much more on Alpine's management or poor management as to why this has happened. I can't really blame Piastri on anything. The only thing maybe is the tweet. Maybe he could have done it behind closed doors, but it's 2022. Social media is a big part of it, and Alpine did put out a statement. So, even that is not a massive criticism from me. So for me, it's just a downfall or failure of Alpine's management, which has caused this, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We said it at the time of Alonso leaving, that completely blindsided the team, and they just didn't have their ducks in a row in the way they should have done in case that happened with Piastri, and were completely left in the lurch. And they shouldn't have been. They should have. They've been relying on letters of intent and things like that, and probably really just agreements at the back of a motorhome, which you're not going to say anything different to. So it seems like Alpine probably need to have a bit more on paper and a bit more, a bit less leeway for what their drivers could do. Essentially, what they had was a promise that they would get Oscar Piastri into a 2023 seat, but they didn't have exclusive rights to putting him into a 2023 seat because he has his own management team. And I think his management team weren't obviously going to sign that away to Alpine becoming his management, which is fairly obvious because they get their own cut. They're not going to say, well, we're just going to sit here and do anything, because Alpine wouldn't let them get their own cut. So that's simple business. That's fair enough. But if that's going to happen, you still need to keep your head straight and keep it away and keep on top of everything, which they haven't done. And that's very poor, which is why all of this has come to this. I think I agree with you in the sense that you kind of think, Oscar didn't need to do a tweet immediately. He didn't need to put it out there. It's a bit rough and ready, if that makes sense, of a way of doing it, and a bit of skullduggery. But on the flip side of that, it's the best way to get it sorted quickly is to make a furore and to really make it obvious that there's a fight going on. Because if this was done behind closed doors, then it would be fun to get a massive shock today, but I don't think it would have happened now. I think it would have happened in about December, because there wouldn't have been just a push to do it. There wouldn't have been that kind of mindset, because we know political organizations are political. So I think there's a big element of that that's just to get it done. And I think that's worked wonders to make it move this quickly.
And I think But I think people, if anyone's thinking, oh, Piastri's been disloyal or anything like that, what they've got to understand is, the start of July, Piastri's thinking Alpine are going to sign Alonso for next year or 2 years or whatever. Alonso will be with them next year. So when you're in that position, you've got to find what's best for you for next year. So that was either Williams or McLaren, and it's quite obvious McLaren is the better choice than Williams at the moment. Yes, they're both not winning teams, but McLaren's just further up the grid. So Piastri, in his head, thought Alonso was going to sign a new deal. That's why this has happened. So that's why I can't really blame Piastri. And I think the only thing I'm left kind of questioning is if Alpine. Well, yeah, it seems Alpine didn't know that Piastri had that sign with McLaren, obviously, but because surely they should have signed Alonso for next year, but they didn't. So I don't know. It's either really poor mismanagement from Alpine or a bit of backstabbing from Piastri, or a bit of both. But yeah, I can't blame Piastri at all. Yeah, a bit of both. Yeah,
a bit of both. I think because Piastri's the fresh face and because he's the hot shot, he's going to come out of this bit better than Alpine. But there is a lot of kind of, you could say a kind man would call it shrewd, a cynic would call it foul play into what's been done. People talk all about gentlemen's agreements as if they're amazing, and one day a gentleman's agreement is how it should be done, the next day it's not. So that's just the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion is obviously going to be in Oscar Piastri's favour because he does deserve to be on the Formula One grid, and being with McLaren is a great team for that. So who have famously taken a chance on rookies and successfully done so. And if you look at McLaren's most recent rookies, Lando Norris is obviously a superstar. Stoffel Van Dorn's just won the Formula E World Championship. Kevin Magnussen's still on the F1 grid, and Lewis Hamilton's the most successful Formula One driver of all time. So if you just take them as a cross section of McLaren bred drivers, then, which I think, I don't think there's any other rookies since in that kind of list of McLaren drivers who I can name. So they do a job well, and they nurture a driver well. So hopefully they can do the same with Piastri. Or do you think there's going to be a touch of the Ricciardos to it?
What, you mean Piastri will underperform?
Yeah.
See, I think it'll go two way. I don't think there'll be a middle ground. I think he'll either be a disaster or the next world champion. I think and I'm someone who hasn't always rated Piastri. I am of belief that I need to wait to see him in F1 before seeing, yes, he's, won the last 3 titles in junior Formula at the first time I've asked him, which is amazing. I don't know.
He was second year in Renault Euro Cup, actually.
Second year. Yeah. There we go. No, not so good after it, no. But he's up against Norris, who some people believe is a future world champion anyway. So if he can match him straight away, then that will be amazing. But like you said, with the Ricciardo thing, Ricciardo, Sainz, and Norris have talked about how strange the McLaren car is. So if Piastri did underperform, I think I wouldn't go that hard on him just because he's driving a McLaren, and because of what 3 great drivers have said, Ricciardo, Sainz, and Norris, about the weird handling of the car. I'll be willing to give him a bit of leeway almost if he does underperform, because I feel like if he went to a different, say if he stayed at Alpine, I could see him beating Ocon, but maybe in the McLaren it could be exposed. So I think that's something people have got to be aware about, and I'm really not too sure which way it will go. That's why I think it will either be amazing or like a bit like Ricciardo.
Yeah, his junior series are a bit of an enigma, because I think in Formula 3 he never qualified in the front row, but won races really well, and that was really good racecraft and really good race pace. But then in Formula 2 he got like 5 poles in a row, and then was doing amazing racecraft as well. So it feels like as a driver he's cleaned himself up as he's gone along, and I think there's a good argument to say that the sort of 3,500 kilometers of mileage he's got under his belt in a Formula One car, well, an Alpine Formula One car, isn't going to harm him. All you could say is that that's the configuration of car that Ricciardo did well in and came from. And if he's doing well in that, then that could be a bit different to what he needs to do well in at McLaren. But because he's done well in everything he's jumped in, you could say he's got the adaptability to work in that McLaren in a way that Norris has proven is possible to do. So there are yings and yangs to it, but I think I'm leaning on the side of I have a bit more faith in him than Ricciardo now, because Ricciardo obviously was stuck in the mud, but I think fresh blood is a good way of trying to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think, whatever happened, right now it looks like McLaren are going to have one of the best lineups next year on an already quality grid.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, it's a massive improvement on Ricciardo on paper. But I'm just not willing to, say how it's going to go yet, which is weird of me because normally I'm very opinionated, as you know. But I just can't for this.
Yeah, I mean, he could be in for a baptism of fire, but I think it for Piastri, it is the best outcome, and that's gone incredibly well. Obviously,
what do you? I was just going to ask, what do you think on the Ricciardo McLaren? Like, should McLaren handle that fairly? Do you think?
Well, it's all a bit cloak and daggers in a few bits. Sort of Piastri being signed at around the British Grand Prix weekend, and Ricciardo very publicly being assured by the team and assuring himself that he's going to stick it out with this team, because there is a good 2 months between the announcement of Ricciardo leaving and Piastri being signed, which is a date I think McLaren probably hoped wasn't released into the public sphere. But I mean, it's kind of the way you've got to play the game. They could have been really decent with Ricciardo and said, like, I mean, we don't know what they've said to Ricciardo. We don't know when they've said things to Ricciardo. The implication is that Ricciardo didn't know until a certain amount of time. And that's the implication from Ricciardo's side. But McLaren are completely denying that. So we've seen drivers before just sort of go against the party line just for a bit of fun when they know they've been sacked. Like, there was a whole Netflix episode about Sebastian Vettel doing that, and just having a bit of fun and clearly being annoyed. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's various sides of that. But I also wouldn't be surprised if McLaren is saying stuff that isn't necessarily on the money, just to appear as prudent and as slick as possible. But I do also think if you got the chance to get Piastri in the way they wanted him, they had to go when they did. And I think they are canny operators and they know how the driver market works in a way that blindsided Alpine a bit for some reason, who have always been pretty decent at being a bit canny on that as well. So I think McLaren had to go and they did. And you can always sack a driver, but sometimes it's a lot harder to sign a driver, particularly one who's linked to other teams. And there was definitely AlphaTauri and Helmut Marko are sniffing around Oscar Piastri as well, and Williams. And all the rumors were that Williams are going to announce him at Silverstone. So McLaren saw that and saw, okay, right, so this is 4 teams counting themselves who definitely want a piece of Oscar Piastri, and he wants to sign with us. We've got to take it now because we don't know what could be put on the table elsewhere. Yeah, they don't know what Oscar Piastri is saying. They probably have from the management saying, well, we've got all of this going, and if you really want us, come get us. So they did. And really, you've got to respect McLaren for that. But it is a hard one to leave a driver in the loop for so long, but I think this does get forgotten about a lot. And in Formula One, like, the amount of drivers who learn through the media that they've lost their seat and things like that is not on. And I do think Ricciardo probably shouldn't have been exposed to so many rumors in the way that he was. He should have known. But I think McLaren probably didn't expect it all to unfold in the way it did and thought they could control the narrative a bit more. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to, which means that they've been, in the benefit of hindsight, I think they would have handled this differently. But I think they've been a little bit hamstrung by Alpine's mess, to be honest. It makes them look a little bit more gameplay, which it is, but I think this wasn't their intention.
Yeah. Also, I think they would have been McLaren and Ricciardo would have been talking for months. I mean, that was that Brown, that comment about Ricciardo not performing or something. That was around Monaco or something. I think that back in May, and Ricciardo knows with his performances that he would have they would have been they would have been talking about it for a long time. I feel so. Yeah, I think it's fine the way they've done it, and I think you're right. It's more Alpine's mess that McLaren have got kind of stuck in almost. I think McLaren have played it fairly, I feel. So yeah, I don't think there's too much discretion there. And then maybe part of why we didn't hear about Ricciardo leaving McLaren is because they wanted to find him a new team. Although looking at Ricciardo's body language recently, maybe he hasn't found a new team anyway. Who knows? But yeah, that's a whole separate story. But yeah, it's all resolved now, finally, and I think it's played out probably the right way. McLaren has done well to get the driver they wanted, and now been completely failed by letting a two-time world champion go and the Formula 2 hot prospect go.
Yeah, and it ticks off of one box on the driver market list, but it officially opens up the Alpine seat. Just a couple of minutes on that, but we'll probably do some silly season stuff as we go into Monza and the big gap until the flyaway series starts. Gasly's being heavily linked with that. Apparently he's been apparently they've nearly signed everything off on the Red Bull side. That's what Helmut Marko has alluded to on Sky Sports Germany. And he's denied Mick Schumacher, basically. But he hasn't denied Colton Herta. Ralph Schumacher, he said to Ralph Schumacher and co on German TV that we've got our own junior program, we'll look into that. And Ralph Schumacher said to him, is that an American guy then? And Helmut Marko just chuckled and apparently didn't say anything. So that looks like it's in motion as well. But there are a few more interesting prospects down the grid. Haas and Williams. Haas has become a much more prospective drive for many drivers because a much more sought after cockpit. Now they're a good team, a competitive team, not necessarily a great team, and Williams is always going to be interesting to people because it's Williams, and they're not awful, but they're not great. But they're a team that are there and are showing signs of progression, particularly at this stage of the season. So those are really where the question marks lie, and I don't know what's going to happen at all there.
Neither do I. I think the only thing, I'll say this to Adam, there's so many rumours and reports. People, if you're listening or watching this, you've just got to only look at the big publications, what the race and Autosport or the BBC is saying, because there'll be lots of rubbish out there, quite frankly. And I think the only thing I can predict,
like us.
Well, of course, yeah, but the only thing I can predict, which I'm kind of sure about, is one of or both Schumacher and Ricciardo will not be on the grid next year. Everything else is quite open. I think the Gasly to Alpine will happen. Then after that, it could go anyway with Williams, AlphaTauri, and then Haas.
I won't rule out one of them. I think I can see it being that both of them are on the grid and both of them are off the grid. I just see that for some reason all over. I feel like at this stage of the season last year, we were very much, everything seemed to be signed on, apart from all just to be ticked off and announced, with Joe Guan Yu coming into Alfa Romeo, Russell going to Mercedes. The kind of storylines were all sort of settled there. The only thing that kind of popped up as a surprise was Albon. But now all the sort of surprises seem to come up and go. And I think this triple header is going to be a wheeler dealer triple header. And come Suzuka, come Singapore, and that is going to be a bit more interesting in the rumor mill, because a few things could emerge then. That's what I predict, because that's going back to sort of the more traditional time for the rumor mill to really kind of drop a few bombshells. So let's see what happens then. Do you have any wild predictions, Nigel? Quickly.
Oof. I love it. I don't know. It depends what you mean by wild. Like,
I don't know, Brendan Hartley wild, that kind of thing.
Like, no, nothing like that. I don't.
Because I mean,
I don't know.
Personally, I wouldn't sign Schumacher or Ricciardo or Latifi or Tsunoda or Giovinazzi, and they're the only people who seem to be being thrown around for this kind of seats. But then I also wouldn't sign Drugovic. I wouldn't sign Porcher. I wouldn't sign Sargent or Doohan either. The top four in F2.
So you wouldn't sign anyone in the world.
Well, that's the thing. That's why I raised the Hartley thing, because at that kind of stage, there was a kind of a point where it's kind of like, well, a driver we have to sign, we have to go a little bit left field. And
Brendan Hartley would not be on the grid.
I'm not saying it will be Hartley, but I'm saying the kind of concept around it is, okay, this is a driver that Red Bull had ties with back in the day, and his sports car career has been exemplary, and it has been exemplary since as well, actually, to point out. So let's give him a go in F1, and it was a deserved go at that kind of thing. So I don't know whether there's a chance for a team to go looking in that kind of way, which is why someone like Colton Herter is being spoken about. And whether there's a chance to go to sports cars or go to Formula E or IndyCar and see any more hotshots there, because you've got a Pato O'Ward or someone like that who probably could realistically make a good shot at F1 and that kind of thing. And
Palou.
You've got, sorry?
Palou, Alex Palou, possibly.
Yeah, exactly. People like that. So, I mean, if you're Williams, that's in the Williams team kind of DNA, is to take a shot on a feisty IndyCar driver.
Yeah. Well, that was like 20 years ago, wasn't it, when they did that?
Yeah, and it worked. Jacques Villeneuve won the championship. Montoya was pretty excellent. So Zanardi was a bit of a letdown, but unfortunately. But the other times it worked. So who knows? I would personally be fishing around like that, but F1 does live in a bubble.
Yeah.
In fact, the Giovinazzi's got another chance, despite the worst season in professional sport of the year in his Formula E season, is proof of insularity. But who knows?
Yeah, it's a bit. I won't go as far as saying it's a bit of a joke, but it's not right that he's getting back on the grid again after the second time after his little stint in 2017 and back in.
He deserved the 2019 chance. Obviously, because I think as a hangover from his excellent debut Formula 2 year, which was genuinely excellent.
Better than Gasly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the 3 years he got were the 3 years he got.
Yeah.
And he did show flashes. He didn't consistently put them together. And it's fine to do a few FP1s or something, or a few testing sessions to correlate with Ferrari, because you are a Ferrari test driver. And Ferrari have been let down by that in the past, namely Luca Badoer. But I think the fact that if he even is being considered as a driver for a seat, I agree with you that it's close to a bit of a joke. I mean, he's not even being considered for a drive in sports cars or Formula E. I think the only chance he can get as a driver is an AF Corsa drive. I think the only place you're going to find Giovinazzi is going to be the Ferrari WEC situation next year, and I'd be heavily surprised if that's not where he's driving.
I think he will be at Haas. I think he could be. I think it'll be Giovinazzi or Ricciardo at Haas. AlphaTauri, absolutely no idea. And then Williams, I think, will keep Latifi. That's how I think it'll go. And then Gasly Alpine, obviously.
Yeah, I think I'm coming on board with that as well, which is just
it just leaves Schumacher like.
Well, I'm not convinced Herter will get on the grid, but I mean, I don't know how they're going to fudge the super license stuff unless they do a World Motorsport Council meeting to say, actually, IndyCar, we're going to respect you as a series.
It's so wrong that how could an IndyCar
winner or something gets the same amount as the fourth person in Frecker or something, isn't it? And
IndyCar should be equivalent to F2 at the very least.
Well, in Formula E, if you're in Formula E, you automatically get a super license, even if you don't have anything to do with that. So you kind of say like someone like who obviously doesn't have a super license in Formula E, like who has no F1 experience, won it, they'll get a super license. So IndyCar really, I think, should be on the same level as that.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, that we can
Yeah.
rant about that another time with
Yes, we
Adam.
definitely can.
So yeah.
It's obviously the middle of the Zandvoort weekend. We've had the first 2 practice sessions. We're just going to have 30 seconds on that. Ferrari 1-2 and FP2. Mercedes looking good. Do you think that's the kind of course of the weekend? Ferrari, Red Bull 3-way fight?
I think so. I wrote in my preview for TotalMotorsport.com that we're going to see 6-way scrap this weekend, and I think that's still possible. I think Red Bull will come back into it. I think they normally play things a bit safe on Fridays.
I agree.
I think qualifying is going to be amazing because it's such an old school circuit. Risk versus reward. They're still close to the grass and the gravel. So I think whoever sticks it on pole, whether that is Hamilton, Leclerc, Russell, or Verstappen, is going to be in a phenomenal lap. And the atmosphere has been absolutely amazing already as well. I think the race is going to be a strategic affair. So it's all the right ingredients that we want. And I was telling Adam on the preview, which you should go back and watch, by the way, before qualifying in the race. We haven't had a proper race-long scrap since Miami because the last 10 or so races, Ferrari at the front. I think Verstappen didn't have the pace, I'd argue, in Austria. I mean like a proper, evenly-ish matched race. Well, it's a good point. Because I was thinking about Leclerc Verstappen. I was thinking about Leclerc Verstappen, and Leclerc's out the back then, wasn't he? So yeah, you can argue Canada. So never mind.
Sorry.
Yeah, we haven't had many in the last 10 races. We've only had 1 or 2.
Well, Leclerc's had 1 podium in the past 9.
Oh, there you go. Which is that's 1 in. Wow, I didn't know that. That's mad.
Exactly.
Oh. But yeah, I hope we get a multiple car race long strategic scrap. And I think that's what we will get.
I think so too. I think that would be what Zandvoort as a track kind of deserves in a kind of Hungarian kind of race. And it's got a really neat old school feel to it. It's got F2 and F3 there as well, which is great fun. And I think it's gonna be a pretty good weekend. It was a success last year. There's I think there's a threat of rain for quali. I'm not sure.
Yes. Yeah.
So Zandvoort in the wet, crikey. But we'll see. If you're listening to this anytime other than Saturday morning, sorry. And point and laugh at us, but that's kind of what we put ourselves out for. But anyway, thank you very much for this little bonus Oscar ep. And we hope you enjoy the Zandvoort weekend, and we will see you again soon. Ta-ra.